Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Neem Capsule. You're welcome. My name is Adedoyin Beteko, Senior Communications Officer here at Neem Foundation, and you're welcome to another segment of the podcast. Last week, we spoke about fake news, where we had Ahmed Jumare Belsuk and Chini, who joined us on the show. If you've not listened to it, please go to our website, neemfoundation.org.ng. You can also check it on our YouTube page. Just Google New Foundation, and you'll see it there. This week we'll be talking about education in Nigeria. I'm very sure that someone is rolling their eyes already. Yes, it's not something new, but I think it's something that we really need to keep talking about and keep preferring solutions. As we know, we are entering into a political phase of the country, hopefully one that would show more light on the education system. As we all know, as of 2022, this October 2022, about 20 million children are out of school, and that's a real huge spike from 10 million in 2020, according to UNICEF. Also, according to UNICEF, about 11,536 schools were shut down since December 2020 due to security challenges. And also, in the last 7 years, between 2015 and 2021, the total budgetary allocation for education has been between 5.39% and 10.79%, which is really, really low compared to the UNESCO benchmark of 15 to 20% for local and public expenditure. So we see that Nigeria is not doing really well. I think we can agree on that. So with me here, to discuss about this, are two guests, two experts who will be talking about education from different angles. We'll be looking at out-of-school children, education in conflict zones, the relevance of our curriculum, our current curriculum. We'll talk about critical thinking and skills development, and then we'll talk about education funding. We have another guest that will be joining us much later, but I'll allow my guests introduce themselves. I think I'll start with the lady in the house.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariam Nambaram. I'm the program officer at Neem Foundation for Psychology and Education.
Thank you so much. And
hi everyone, Benga Ogundare here. I'm a communications officer here at Neem Foundation. Really good to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Mustafa Al Hassan will be joining us shortly. He is our program manager for education here and policy here at Neem Foundation. So let's start, with the obvious elephant in the room, out of school children, 20 million Nigerian children. Miriam, what do you have to say about that? That number is, I'm pretty sure there are some countries that are not even up to that. Yeah.
It's a huge number, and I think what we also need to start looking at is what the effects of having this huge amount of children out of school are. Obviously, we're denying them their basic human rights, but also I think it's come to the point that we need to recognize and understand what the barriers are to access to education in this country, and what we can do to actually help them. And away from that, we look at these things like as metrics, right? So we have this huge number where we're saying, okay, there are 20 million children out of school, but what about the children that are in school? Can we even guarantee that the education that they are receiving is quality education? When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG 4 basically talks about the goal is to achieve quality education for all. It's one thing to try and increase the number of out-of-school children, but when we not to increase, to reduce the number of out-of-school children, but once we do put these children in schools, how then do we guarantee that that this education that we are giving them is actually making an impact? Because we see on a day-to-day, there are people who will come and say to you, oh, I went to school, I have my SSCE certificate, which insinuates that they've completed 12 the stipulated 12 years of education, but they can't even write a proper sentence. Then they don't have the ability to think critically. And that also affects our workforce as a nation, and it has like effects that we're not seeing now that we will see much later. And also it also ties into things like the rising levels of insecurity that we're seeing in the country at the moment, because once these children are not engaged, it's easy to engage them in something else. It's easy to give them a platform to, make them believe that they are wanted or they're heard, rather than just walking the streets, in abject poverty. So I think we need to sit down and we need to critically look at not just the number of out-of-school children that we have at the moment in the country, because it's an insane number. When we say 20 million, like I don't think we realize the magnitude of 20 million. Can you fit 20 million people into a single building? This building that we're in now, we can't. We can't even fit up to 200. We can't even fit, exactly, Abuja. You go for like a wedding event and they tell you, like this hall can take 1,000 people, and you're like, oh my God, there's so many people here. So visually, let's try and visualize. We have 20 million children that are not receiving the appropriate education. They don't even have access to education. Let's even forget about they're not receiving quality education. Let's start with they don't even have access to education. And how do we change that?
So we're going to come to the consequences, but Minga,
okay,
she mentioned something and I like where this conversation is headed in terms of, so apart from the out-of-school children, we're also looking at people in school but are not properly educated. So people who are in school but cannot, like, there is almost nothing to show for it. I mean, we're going to talk about our curriculum as it stands, which is, for the most part, abysmal, right? But let's look at that number. I mean, it's still really staggering to consider that there are 20 million young Nigerians. I mean, let's look at it in terms of generational impact, where we are raising 20 million of us that are disenfranchised, do not have the access that we had, for instance, to go to school. I went to a public primary, secondary, university, and, it's quite saddening that there's a growing generation that would almost not have this same opportunity, right? So what is your take on it? Especially if, apart from we've established the huge number of people who are out of school, but those who are in school and are just basically going through it. What's your take on that?
Well, just like Miriam rightly said, quality education is not a privilege. It's a right. And quality education is not just about education. It's about being qualitatively educated. We have I would want to believe that there may be an equal, if not greater number of people who are being undereducated. So which means what they are being taught, the facilities used in teaching them, the facilitators, we have undertrained people handling positions of classroom teachers. We have children who learn under trees. We have children who basically go to schools that are substandard. And that is an indictment on us as a society. It shows our value systems are defective, because the fundamental of any progressive society is education. And if education is given the backseat, it means that the society is not really interested in making reasonable progress. And for the numbers, 20 million, just like she said, is the size of a country, many countries. I mean, a country with a population of 20 million, probably among the 30 most populated countries in the world. So if we have a country in Nigeria that is uneducated or undereducated, it shows that our trajectory as a nation is defective. And the boomerang effect of this is that within the coming years, we're already seeing it because we're seeing cases of insurgency. One thing people fail to realize is that insurgency is a reaction. It's a reaction to failure. It's not a thing on its own. It's a reaction to something, and it's systemic failure. And the Nigerian educational system, from top to bottom, is defective. And until we begin to profile solutions, just like Neem Foundation is currently doing, until we begin to profile workable solutions that are tailored for our peculiar situation as a country, not solutions that were designed for America or Canada or Europe. Solutions that actually address it to the microscopic level. I think we'll keep on having these discussions without any reasonable improvement.
I agree with you. Miriam, Benga mentioned the insurgency. What are some other consequences of this out-of-school children, especially on sustainable development?
One other thing that you could also look at is the levels of poverty. When you have a largely uneducated workforce, the type of work that people are able to do is not necessarily one that will, I don't want to say like sustain. Like you have a lot of people who are able to carry out menial jobs because they don't have the qualifications really to do more with their life. And again, they don't even get paid well. So if you look at like the typical labor force here, how we even get away with paying, I know, like nannies, house helps and stuff. Some of them, they come, you pay them 5K. And we all know that that's not something someone can live on. But they accept it because there really isn't much out there for them. There aren't opportunities available to them because of their level of education. There's nothing really that they can bring to the table except maybe like their I don't want to say like their hand skills, what they can do with their hands. There isn't really like a lot that they've been able to believe that they can do with their brains because they feel like, oh well, I didn't complete school, so I can't go and work in the office. Even though that's not like it's not. So many people have different paths in life. Not everybody gets a full education, but they're able to make something of themselves. But we're going to see all this in large numbers because the opportunity just isn't there. And even away from that, you have even like the political sphere. I say this all the time. Nigeria doesn't really function on ideology. We function of stomach infrastructure. If a politician wants to be your president, he's not going to tell you, he's not going to come and be like, oh, this is my belief. Let me just go, based on, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, these are my views. No, it's who during election season is able to line my pockets and give me a full sack of rice that I know is going to, make sure that me and my family are okay for the next month or two. So things like that, it actually takes away our ability to think critically and be able to apply ourselves to know when to do what is right and what is not, because your motivation behind a lot of things is just getting to the next day and basically survival.
What really baffles me is the fact that this generation, which is you and I, the young ones, will grow up to be senior citizens, and the ones we've failed to educate are the ones we'll be handing over to. I mean, just take a moment to just imagine that there will come a time when political holders, people in charge of our artillery, people in charge of if our generation is able to build nuclear systems, people in charge of our nuclear, that's if we do not subcontract it to foreigners, which is leading to another entire discussion again. People will be making executive decisions about a whole country, that entire generation that we are forced to hand over to due to nature. We can't live forever, would potentially be missing on the opportunity to get a proper education, and not just schooling. I like what Miriam said, and it goes back to one of my fundamental beliefs where from uni, which is going to segue into our next discussion on our our current curriculum. From uni, my lecturers, most of my lecturers, right, the note that they used to teach me was the note they wrote as students. Like, let me take that again. The notes that they were dictating to read to me were the notes they took down as students, and they are teaching again. And this is like another 20-something year gap, and they are still teaching it, and it's still something that goes on in most public schools. How many people can afford private schools? How many people can afford to fly their children abroad, for a proper education? And so let's just look at our current education system. And this question is for you, Binga. How relevant is our existing curriculum to tackle the current challenges and realities, especially in terms of ICT
Well, I think before we even try to address that question, we really need to know where we are so that we have a better perspective. Currently, Nigeria, as it is, just like you said, operates on largely, I wouldn't say absolutely, but largely operates on obsolete systems, obsolete curriculum. These curriculums don't really address the current realities. And the reason for that is that we are a country that, a country that is more comfortable just sticking to routine, sticking to precedents, and I think afraid to, innovate and make changes. If you look at our educational system, you see that the main components that drive nations like, the United States, Canada, even in Africa here, countries like Ghana, Rwanda,
South Africa.
STEM, science, technology, and all of that, you see that in our schools, even the schools where they are taught, they aren't taught with the right equipment, they aren't taught with the right expertise. They are just more like cosmetic approaches to this thing. And what that means is that we are creating a generation that is not equipped. Currently, we're having brain drain, which means there's a large gap. And that's why you find somebody funnily said that, you see, the reason why your bank apps develop funny faults is because the tech guys have migrated and now you now have aspiring tech bros and lead the apps and all of that. So that just shows you that there is a gap and we're struggling to fill it. If you look at in the field of medicine, you find out most of our doctors are in the UK, in the US, just digressing from the tech angle. And what that tells you is that there is a gap and there is no, the people to fill it are not there. And the system to breed the people to fill it is currently failed. And what that means is that we are entering into a future we are not prepared for. We're entering into a future that will catch us by surprise. I mean, we basically outsource everything in this country. I was looking at where I think a certain security agency was posting on social media that, they had gotten drone technologies, and I saw all foreigners. And it's funny because there is a guy in the US who is a master. He became a multi-billionaire developing these technologies, which means that we have the capacity, intellectual capacity, but we are lacking in the enabling environment, we're lacking in the right policies, we're lacking in tools, we're lacking in personnel. And I think until we get it right, we'll continue to be at the back seat in terms of developing all of that.
When you talked about the drone technology, I remember before the last election, there was a particular Nigerian who presented something around drones that he built, and is currently being used by the U.S. military. A Nigerian, who had the opportunity of studying abroad. And, when you talk about that brain drain, it's really sad because the really smart ones are being exported. The ones that decide to stay are being unrecognized or do not have the enabling environment.
That's right.
Or they don't have people that they can pass on this information to, because apart from being willing to learn, you should, there are certain things that you still need, that at least that fundamental understanding of ABCs, your numbers, your formulas, and everything to be able to understand. But like the singer says, problem not the finish. So let's look at some positive light. Miriam, I know that Neem Foundation education is really, really key to a lot of things that we do. Is really key to a lot of things that we do. And I really want you to talk about the curriculum, our existing curriculum in Nigeria, and actually in line with some of the projects that you run, and how NIM has been able to fix that issue, especially from the ICT and the MHPSS. I would like you to talk more on that aspect.
Okay, so basically, we have a national curriculum that we all have to adhere to, whether you're teaching in a school or not, depending on the type of, if you intend for your beneficiaries to write, be it WAEC, JAMB, etc., to be able to progress into university. And so the beautiful thing about what NEEM has been able to do is we developed a creative methodology to go hand in hand with the national curriculum that we have to be able to increase our beneficiaries' attainment levels. Because you think about it, most of our beneficiaries are, well, in education anyway, are children who have been out of school as a result of the Boko Haram insurgency. So we have children that spent 3, 4, 5 years of their life no education. A lot of them, when they came, they couldn't even do ABC. They couldn't identify numbers. They couldn't speak a lick of English. So, it was really important for us not to just teach them what was in the curriculum, but to also adapt it to a way that is contextually relevant to them. So that's where the creative education methodology comes in. So we use things like art, drama, songs, just things to make it easier for them to be able to remember and be able to apply themselves. It also increases their level of critical thinking, because that's really, really important. You have to be able to dissect the information that you receive from anywhere. And when you look back at it, given the environment that they were coming from, where there was a lot of radicalization going on, it was our method of preventing and countering violent extremism and radicalization of these children, because a lot of them were directly affected by the Boko Haram insurgency, be it that their parents were members of, maybe they were children associated with armed groups. Their parents could be like former members of Boko Haram, or the civilian, or their parents were like part of the civilian joint task force. So these children saw it all. And it was also important for us to focus on girls, because they're the most marginalized community when it comes to education. 60% of our out-of-school numbers are actually girls. So what we've been able to create at Lafia, that's the name of the project, is that we've been able to create an environment where we give beneficiaries a safe space to come and learn using these creative methodologies, where by providing them quality education, by not even just, it was important for us to have continuous capacity building for the teachers. So it's something that we do year in, year out. You're constantly building the capacity of these teachers, because it's not something that is just done once and left alone. We have so many teachers who teach in so many schools that don't get the required training and the support that they require, and that also affects their delivery of education to your students. And you want your students to be happy. You want them to love their teachers. You want their teachers to love them as well, and give them their best. And I can honestly say that we have built that kind of environment at Lafia. Like, you go and you see the children are happy to be there, the teachers are happy to be there. They're always willing to make things work. When we have issues, they themselves are trying to come up with solutions before it even comes to me. And sometimes I'm like, okay, gone, but it's a beautiful enabling environment. And given the context as well, one of the things that was really important for us to have was the MHPSS aspect of it, because when you have children who have gone through trauma,
for the sake of our listeners, MHPSS
my bad.
means
I got a bit technical there.
yes. So
Mental health and psychosocial support. So it was really important that we also deliver mental health and psychosocial supports to our beneficiaries, because these are children who have gone through traumatic events. A lot of them came and we were seeing signs of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and
again PTSD,
post-traumatic stress disorder,
yes,
depression and anxiety. And there was no way you could put them in a classroom and just expect them to learn. There's so many psychological theories that even back that up. Like when you look at Sweller's theory of cognitive load, that says there's only a particular amount of information that an individual can hold in. So when you now put common psychological disorders into the mix, that already pushes in intrusive thoughts, because they're thinking about whatever it is that they went through and all the trauma, or their depression is, affecting their ability to concentrate, and you can't expect them to actually take in new information. So it's really important for us to also run a side-by-side trauma-informed care approach, where we train the teachers in trauma-informed practices that they're able to use hand in hand in their delivery of education at the learning center. And also, when we're trying to, so the last question was on STEM, right?
yes.
Okay, so again, there isn't really much women in the STEM space at the moment, whether in Nigeria, even like globally. It's something that, it's building. We're trying to gain more access for women, giving them more access to STEM because of the typical environment that it is. So one of the things that was really, really important for us was to provide our beneficiaries with STEM classes. Thankfully, I think in 2018, the Australian government gave us funding to set up the IT lab, where we started another component under the Lafia Sari initiative called Coding for Peace. So we're able to kit the lab completely with like robotics kits, computers, and they would have classes where they learn how to code. They're building websites, they're designing magazines, they're, basic use of the computer, so being able to use Word, Excel. Again, it's beautiful to see their progress, especially when you even have like parents come in and they're like, our children, children who even go to private school in Maiduguri can't even compete with them when it comes to like speaking English and writing and all that. And it's a testament to the work that we do at Neem and our focus on not just reducing the number of out of school children by just putting them in school, but actually ensuring that they receive that quality education that they deserve, and looking at education as from a holistic point of view, where you're not just focused on the academics. Yes, the academics really are the end goal or one of the outcomes that we look at, but it's also important that your students are well adjusted. It's important that you have community support. It's important that you have support from their parents, because if you don't have their parents buy-in, I don't know how you expect your child to come to school in the morning. Yeah. So all these little things add up, and it's really, really important that we start to view education not just as like a one-way street where it just amounts to academics, but we need to start looking at it holistically. We need to start looking at the involvement on different levels, how environment affects children, how their community affects them, how their teachers affect them, and also how they themselves affect themselves. So how do we then make sure that we are providing adequate quality education for these beneficiaries?
That's $1 million question right now. And I'm really excited at the inspiring work that Neem does, especially in this conflict zones, because if you look at the scale of the conflict in Nigeria, there are some teenagers who don't know what a peaceful Nigeria looks like. Wow. Like there are some teenagers who they have no idea what a peaceful Nigeria looks like. Benga, let's talk about education in conflict zones. And Miriam has sort of set the stage for that. But let's look at it more critically, especially in terms of the fact that for teenagers, like I just mentioned, who have never experienced what a peaceful Nigeria truly looks like, for them, it's all about survival. Every single day is survival. How do I live to the end of today and wake up and start again tomorrow? And for them, sometimes education might be a luxury, right? But we found out time and time again that education is directly linked to peace building and also sustainable development, right? So how effective is education in promoting peace and development in areas affected by conflict?
Well, like you rightly said earlier, many of these kids have come to see the status quo as survival. And just like Miriam said, the right approach to education should be holistic. It shouldn't be just a one-way street. It should be multifaceted, multi-pronged to achieve the desired result. I think as it affects conflict zones, the Nigerian education system is, I would say, lagging behind. It's lagging behind because it doesn't really address some of these fundamental issues. And if not for the interventions of organizations like Neem, just like she said, and some of the unique programs that are tailored to actually address these things, I think we would ordinarily be approaching this using, just like I said earlier, using a predefined template that doesn't really address the situation. Many of these kids have grown up to realize that there's no hope. The future is bleak. And education is the only tool, or maybe one of the major tools that is strong enough to give them a new perspective, a new direction, a feeling of hope. You know, because most of these things are fundamentally from the mind. I mean, somebody has been orientated to see somebody of another tribe as his enemy. And because his fathers believed it, because the social media has propagated it, then how are we going to change that? We need to go to the fundamentals, and the fundamental here is the education. We need to let them know that equipped with the right knowledge, equipped with the right skills, equipped with the right perspectives, they can make something out of their life. It doesn't matter whether you are from the troubled spot in Baga, or you are from the troubled places in Bama, or you are from one remote village in Zampara. If you are able to get the right knowledge, the right education, the right exposure, you can have the same level playing field with somebody in Lagos, somebody in Nairobi, somebody in Kigali, Rwanda. It doesn't matter what the past may be. It doesn't matter what experiences may be. It doesn't matter how traumatic the experiences are. I'm not trying to downplay the experiences, but I think education is that tool that points them to a light at the end of the tunnel. And that is why I feel we can still do better. Whether as civil society, whether as government, we need to understand that education, like I said, it's not a privilege. It's a right. And one thing about right is that it can be enforced. And until we begin to place demands on the people that, matter. I mean, look at the statistic you reeled out earlier. We are having less than 10% of our budgetary allocation to education. And then we are having recurrent expenditure getting maybe over 50%. What recurrent expenditure is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And many of these expenditures don't really address the fundamentals. So we have 10% going to all strata of education. It means we have deficit in terms of manpower, deficit in terms of infrastructure, deficit in terms of, whatever you can imagine. And this is a far cry, and this is an indictment on us as a people. I would not want to say on the government because it's a totalitarian issue, which means everybody has a role to play. And just in closing, I just want to say that education is critical for us to move forward from where we are. You can use military approach. You can send in drones. You can send in helicopters. You can even get mercenaries. But the problem with military approach is that it doesn't solve the problem. It just gives a cosmetic solution on the surface, and then because these people don't have the right are not rightly equipped, they're not rightly exposed, they still it just keeps getting bigger. The monster gets getting bigger and larger and all of that. But with education, we address it from the roots. So it's not from top to bottom, it's from bottom to top approach.
And I like that idea, because if you look at conflicts in Nigeria, they've been majorly ideologies, right?
Yes.
And bullets can't stop ideologies,
Nope.
right?
No.
Military might, brawn alone cannot stop ideologies.
It can't.
It's still education,
Education.
right? Because enlightening people to let them see that the world is much bigger than their environment, their experiences.
Yeah, just to even buttress this, I mean, if you look at the Boko Haram insurgency, I mean, if somebody were to literally translate Boko Haram, it's saying education is abomination. For these people to target education from the fundamental, it's because they understand that once you can capture education, you've captured the minds of the people. And that is why even currently you have a lot of issue of schools closing down, because they are not interested in targeting businesses per se. If you can capture the education of a nation, you've captured the nation, because the education is what determines what becomes of that nation. So years before now, while we were thinking of other things, they had already conceptualized Boko Haram to try and, as much as possible, gag the progress of education. So I think until we realize this and actually begin to put in more efforts, we'll keep on having the circle of violence we see in the Northeast, even spreading to other parts of Nigeria.
Miriam, this affects not just our political future, it affects our economic future, our health centers, the quality of people, basically. The quality of people also is greatly affected. The quality of life, let me use that word, is greatly affected. How do we increase access? I mean, Neem has done it. So it's not like this is theoretical. Neem Foundation has built an example. We have a working structure. We've seen that, yes, this works. We've been able to improve on the current curriculum to include things on critical thinking, which we'll get to shortly, things on skills development, ICT, MHPSS, and other things. So basically, the problem will now be on scaling it, right? And so this is just a little plug. If you're listening to this and you feel that, yes, this is something that really bothers you, and of course, we are always open to partnerships. We've done it. We've seen that, yes, it can work. We have a model that can work. So we're looking. We are reaching out there for potential partners. Join us, civil society, government agencies, whether national or foreign, because apart from, I mean, Nigerians' education is not just for Nigeria alone, because we are part of a global community. So it's actually right for everyone to be able to contribute in one way or another to seeing that every aspect of the human race grows together and there is no one pulling it down or another. So I'm going to come to you, Miriam. How do we increase access to quality of education or quality education in conflict zones?
It has to be a national policy.
I know that obviously Nigeria has developed like the Safe Schools initiative, right? But in that regard, the schools are there. The schools are being established. The infrastructure is being given to schools in conflict areas. So they are building schools. But how do we ensure that they are receiving quality education? There needs to be scaled up teacher training. So we were lucky enough to partner with an organization that allowed us to provide teachers in Maiduguri, in Borno State, working with the Borno State Subeb State University Board to provide teacher training to them in our methodology. So initiatives like that are really important to be able to scale up access to education and to quality education. So this is where it gets, this is where it gets like a bit like political, because you need to do the advocacy. The people that you're advocating with, or advocating to, have to believe in it. And again, it goes back to the allocation for education in the national budget. It also we do not prioritize, sadly enough, we do not prioritize education. There are so many, the Nigerian government as a whole is we spend on things that are not really necessary. There are a lot of costs that we can cut to be able to put it into things that are more important, things like healthcare, things like education, but things like social welfare for individuals. But sometimes I believe, I just feel like we focus on the wrong things. You look at Nigeria before, in times of like my grandfather used to always say to us that, back in the day, if you didn't attend school, your parents would go to jail. And there was like, you could see that, education was prioritized. Look at people like Obafemi Awolowo and what they were able to do in the southwest with education for Yorubas. And then now you look at the education outcomes in states that used to be like top, and it's like below average. We have to go back and reevaluate where we went wrong. Where did we go wrong? Education is constantly being attacked because they have been able to decipher that, one, it is very important, and two, there's not enough care being given to it. So it's one of the easiest things to attack. And then again, you look at it as, if you're able to get into the head of a child in their formative years, it's very easy for them to form an opinion based on what you want. So we go back to the Boko Haram ideologies of how they've perpetrated that, Western education is haram and all that. If you've ever read encounters of how these people were radicalized, it's very simple. They were walking around with MP3 players of lectures that literally said Western education is wrong and it's not what you're supposed to do, and the Quran says this and that, which isn't true. But they're able to manipulate their words to make it seem like okay, and they'll give it to people and they'll make them listen to it over and over. They'll kidnap them and keep them and have them listen to this thing over and over until you start to believe it. So I just think it's really like our priorities. We need to, as a country, we need to rethink our priorities. And I also think if you're voting next year, it's really, really important to not just focus on who a politician is or what party they belong to. It's really, really important for you to actually look at their policies and what they hope to achieve, because we've gone past the point of one evil is better than the other. We need working solutions that are going to work for our country, because we are the generation that are going to get affected. Our children are going to get affected. Most of these guys, like, they've lived their lives. They're the same people who had access to free education that our generation weren't able to receive that because they went there and they messed up the system. So it's really, really important that we think with our heads this time around and we put the right person in power. Can't believe I'm actually doing this.
It's serious when Miriam goes political. And it's true because I won't lie, I'm scared. One, not everyone can japa.
Not everyone
and
can japa.
And people who can japa cannot afford to take their entire family. So one way or another, the country still affects you. Because there are some people who have been opportune to japa, but the burden of their family saying, we've not eaten since morning.
The black tax.
Yes.
The black tax.
The black tax. I mean, so what's what's the essence of you going to another country when you can't even enjoy? I mean, you have to look at the people who sacrifice to take you there or to send you there, right? So it's really key that, especially this our generation, we take it personally, because those above us are currently holding power. Those behind us are currently undereducated. So we're in a very, very precarious situation. Thank you for that word. Right? So, like Miriam said, if we miss it in this coming election, it will affect us and people coming who have already been affected. If we get it right, then we're able to keep our brain powers, smart people, people who are patriotic and so on. Foreign investment comes in, right? And the people who have been disenfranchised are able to start over again, right? And also, when we move on, right, we're able to continue that legacy because someone has put us on the right path, right? And we don't need to start from stage one all over again. Ladies and gentlemen, this still remains the Neem Capsule podcast, and today we are talking about education, and I have Miriam and Gbenga here in the studio with me. Gbenga, let's talk about critical thinking and skills development. One saying I had in uni is don't let your schooling affect your education, and that was really key to me because, like I said, the curriculum or the notes that I was taught with were the ones that my lecturers wrote while they were in uni, right? And so that didn't create critical thinking because our exams were based off of what the lecturer said. So literally, if you have a good mind that can copy and paste.
So you were taught how to cram.
I'm telling you.
Rather than apply yourself.
Yes. I studied electrical engineering. I did not hold a soldering iron until my 300 level, year 3. Whoa. I didn't hold it. And we had to buy it as necessity. We had to buy it to gain access to the lab. So we didn't buy it because we needed to use it, we needed to practice, put to practice what we're taught. We needed to buy it to gain access to something else. So it wasn't at that point that was relevant to us. So it was at my 300 level that I was not thinking, then you continue this way, you're going to be a mechanic and not a baller. You know? So you will see a lot of us students during the day, we just sit in class, we're either sleeping, because at night, that's when we start our own education. That's when we go to the internet. Of course, the internet was only fast at night then. Or we'll go to the library, or then we'll stay in the class and we'll read all through the night, and we'll come to listen to... Most of us would have even finished the curriculum and, gone further. Because most of us knew that the future that we're going out to, that we're graduating to, does not care whether your teacher used curriculum of 20 years old. It's going to present you with real-world, immediate, modern challenges. And if you're not relevant enough to solve them, right, you'll be obsolete, you'll be kicked away. Right, so let's talk about critical thinking and skill development. How can critical thinking be further encouraged within our current education context?
Well, just like you rightly said, the current situation in our education system is such that doesn't give room for expression. I mean, you are only as successful as your ability to adhere to the status quo. Dissent from the status quo makes you a rebel. And I'll just give reference to some of the top companies in Nigeria currently. They're tech companies headed by 20-something-year-olds. You see like Flutterwave, the Gbenga guy, a thoroughbred Nigerian from the Nigerian system, even worked in a Nigerian bank. But at a point, he just realized that he can't keep doing this. And then currently his company is worth many banks combined. Why? Because somebody decided to think away from the status quo. But there's something more interesting about this. The thought process that birthed these innovations weren't imported from Canada. They were here. But somebody just had to say, I have to do things differently. And I feel if we as a people begin to, just like you said, just like I said earlier, is the curriculum. It starts from the curriculum. Our curriculum is not really tailored to address current realities. And that's because the people who formulated, Nigeria is a country, even if you go through the manifestos of these politicians, what they do is that they hire consultants who hire people who go online, gather materials, and just collate stuff that makes sense and make sure it doesn't read plagiarism. So when you run it through a plagiarism checker, it shows 2% plagiarism, but the whole thought was recycled. And it's the same thing with our curriculum. Our curriculum is designed by people who have no idea of what the future should be like, because their own idea of the future is the current reality that they are living. So I think until we begin to have the right people in the right place, I mean, I can imagine someone like Miriam being in charge of education. It may sound funny, but because she's young, but she has a better idea. I mean, listening to her talking about Lafia Serare, talking about all of that, I mean, it shows that she understands the problem. She has gone to the microscopic level, interacted with these people, whether as victims, whether as beneficiaries, and understands where they are and where they should be, and the right way to approach these things. And, from what she said, people even commented that the beneficiaries of this program outperform many people who go to the best private schools in Maiduguri. So that tells you that they have the innate potential. We have the innate potential, but we need the enabling environment. It means that we should shift away from university systems, for instance, that, teach people based on outdated curriculum and does not give room for people to actually be graded or be recognized based on what they do. We need to shift from the grade measurement system to the ability measurement system. I mean, if you look at some of the top brains out there, you realize that they weren't really the best in classes. They just had someone who believed in them. I saw a funny post by a footballer. Is an English footballer. Is a midfielder, James Madison. Now, he said his teacher told him, he said, footballers never make it. Only 1 in a million make it. He said, I'll be that 1 in a million. You see, he had to be a disruptive innovator for him to actually see the light. But how many people have that bravery?
I think about it that how come Nigerian students who leave the system maybe with 2 to third class, they travel abroad and they are spanking, like they're coming out
modeling the system.
they're setting records.
Yes.
So there's something about this system that...
Is it something about the system?
Or we Nigerians?
Is it just pure wickedness? I mean, how many people come and tell you that a lecturer will say to you that I can only give nobody in my class.
Let me tell you. Thank you. Hello. Let me tell you how it was said. I went to public schools. They'll tell you A is for God, B is for me. Then the rest of you can share C, and that will be it. No matter how smart you are, no matter how innovative you are, even if you give him exactly what he said in class, you'll still get that C.
I'm sorry, but there isn't anywhere in the world that something like that is acceptable. Because for me, if you come and I'm seeing that teachers, students failing your class is not something to brag about. That means you're not doing your job.
Actually,
you're not doing it the right way. So for you to come and carry shoulders and say A is for God, B is for me, C is for you guys to share. Excuse me. What?
So in the last podcast, I introduced them to something which I'm going to do here again. In the game of what, there is a card called General Market. So I'm going to ask a general market question. Homeschooling and Nigerian schooling. In this Nigerian context, which one do you think is actually... So I know that, of course, you still need to get some certifications, especially with the country that put so much
Emphasis on
emphasis on paper and certificates and others, which I'm really happy about. Companies like Google, Facebook, even Twitter, and some other Nigerian companies have
Yeah.
even started it where you don't need we don't care about your certificate. You will show us practical example. What can you do? What have you done, right? And what can you do if you're up to the standard that we want? You're hired. If not, you can come with first class in
Astrophysics.
but if you're not able to solve this problem, we are not hiring you, right? So, and the reason I asked that question, so you guys are still going to answer. The reason I asked that question is because we are seeing a lot of people imbibe this nature of homeschooling because they feel like the current curriculum or the current schooling system does not provide the direct, does not meet the needs of the children. There are some children with special needs, for instance. And our current curriculum, our current structure does not even meet to the needs of normal students, let alone special needs, right? So I'm going to open it to any one of you. Homeschooling versus Nigerian schooling.
So I think what the whole homeschooling debate, I don't even think it's about like the difference between Nigerian schooling. It's just that with the way things are now, especially with the current economy, a lot of parents don't feel like they're getting their value for money. These schools are the typical private schools. They're super expensive. And then what you're giving the children the bare minimum, and you can't really say that you have amazing teachers. So you cannot see the value in what it is that you're giving, that you're giving to the children that are being taught. So in terms of like the Nigerian, I think it's one of those things that when you look at it, right, homeschooling is extremely tedious unless you have the time for it. Unless like say maybe there are people who are more flexible with their time and with the work that they do, so they could have time to sort of like pull into their children. But what I've also found in Abuja actually has a homeschool community where they go and you see like the children like meet up and they do like group sessions and they all teach them in one go and then they carry on their individual sessions and all. But also with homeschooling, it's a lot less restrictive. So you're able to teach your children in the way that you want. You're able to focus on the things that you want. And yeah, so I don't know if I would do like a versus between Nigerian schools and homeschooling, only because I think there are benefits to both. And it also depends on you as an individual.
Okay.
It also depends on you as an individual and what you're able to expend in terms of like in terms of the education that you're able to give the children. Like, what does that also mean for some people? It also means that they're going to have like extra teachers and all that. That's another added cost. But it still may not even be expensive as you go, because the school fees I've seen for schools right now, boy, a term can go up to about $1 million for when we're talking about primary school. So then what's it going to be when the child gets into secondary? And then you now start thinking about university as well. Like,
and like you rightly said, there's still a limit to how much you can push into a child's brain. So the fact that you're paying $1 million does not mean that in one day you become Albert Einstein. You can still come home tomorrow and still be Olodo. God have mercy.
But yeah. Personally, I feel like if I were to choose, I mean, I think just like she said, they all have elements that make them positive or that have benefits of them. But I always go for on-site schooling, because like you said at some point, education is not just
schooling.
Teachers. It's the total experience. And that's why even when you see a student who goes full-time and a student who goes part-time, there's always difference in perspective. Because if you go full-time in the Nigerian, you see all these billionaires I called earlier, they went to public schools. And the reason they were able to innovate is because, I'm trying to look at the positive of the pommeling we receive from the Nigerian education system. I guess it makes people tough. It makes people adaptive, flexible, and it makes us, in a way, appreciate the little, and the fact that you go, you interact with your fellow students, you innovate, and it has its benefits. But I think a better idea would be a hybrid system, but in a way that suits your pockets.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So I like where this conversation is at. Should there be greater emphasis on vocational education in our institutions of learning, and to what extent? So I remember in uni, so what I currently work with, comms, started off as designs. In my 200 level, I was studying electrical engineering, and in my 200 level, I started developing the skills that I had identified a while ago, which is designs. As at my 300 level, I was able to have enough to start paying my school fees. So as at 300 level, I knew that
The
my
degree was just for
Your cash cow.
my degree was for my parents.
You had found your calling.
And I found my calling, right? And in some places, that is where you say, "Oh, I want to drop out. I want to go into," but
You can't do.
I can't.
You dare not.
I dare not, because we're in the African setting. So so that's why I started developing. And I told a lot of people. I told them, because I was class governor. So I told a lot of people then, and I remember in my 200 level, I told them that, see, have your degree on one hand, and have what you can do on another. Right? Because in this context, and almost in any other context around the world, just one stream of income is almost not enough,
No, it's not.
except you're a politician.
Unless you're earning in dollars.
Even those who are earning in dollars, they are still,
They're still
there's
hustling
dollars
for
and
more.
there's dollars.
The dollars is a level.
Yes. The singer said, water dollar is still hustling. So so it's not just about, I went to school, I graduated, and this is all I know, right? So what's the emphasis on vocational, and I would like you to bring Lafia, for instance, into context. I know that there are some skills development, entrepreneurship, farming, and all those things, weaving, even ICT in itself. I mean, we look at the Nigerian tech space, for instance, right? So all this vocational training, should there be greater emphasis on it, looking at our current education context, and to what extent?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm one of so I'm a huge advocate for, I don't think everybody needs to go to university. I believe that apprenticeships should be a thing. So, you look at countries like the UK, where once you're done with your A levels, you can go on and you can sign up for an apprenticeship scheme where you work as an apprentice for 2 years, and you're able to, go into the workforce and start getting jobs and all that. And we need to start putting emphasis on vocational skills. We do have vocational colleges here. We have skills acquisition centers, but then a society as a whole just seems to we seem to look at having a university degree as worth more than somebody having a vocational certificate. But I think if I link it back to Lafia, it's really important that we provide our beneficiaries with skills that they're able to make a life for themselves. So if they're not able to go to university, what can they do that they'll be able to make a living? So they have things like, they have things like their entrepreneurship clubs, or like their art clubs and their ICT clubs, where they learn how to do a huge number of things. They have their farming that they do. They grow their own food. They know what should be grown and what time of the year, how to harvest it, blah, blah, blah. Can I say that? Yeah, so, it's honestly so funny. Every time I go to Life here, they're trying to tell me, the students are trying to tell me something that they've made.
Wow.
Whether it's like, so last time they had made their own turarota, you know,
Oh,
do you know, like, so
wow.
their own
Yeah.
incense. They'd made it and they had packaged it like really nicely, labeled it, and said to me, "Come and buy." Another time they had like done soap and they were, you know, marketing that. They made jewelry. That one too. They made me buy. Yesterday I had a meeting with the team and it was like, oh, they've now made their own yaji and they're going to start selling it in their communities. And I'm like, fabulous. So even in those stages, like they learn cost price. They learn about sourcing and procuring raw materials. How much did this cost? How much is my labor for making this going to cost? And how much am I going to sell it in order to make a profit? Obviously, they're doing it on a small scale now, but we can't what do you call it, we can't not see the advantage of learning these things, be it on a small scale or a large scale, because then they're able to carry these things with them into the world and they're able to say, okay, I need to make a living on the side, like you know, I don't have enough money to, even though yes, we pick up the beneficiaries from and we drop them off and everything, but sometimes a few of them live further away from the pickup site, so they have to take like a keke. So so they're like, okay, I'm going to do XYZ, I'm going to make XYZ, and I'm going to sell this, and this is what's going to give me money for my transportation to be able to go to school, or to be able to get to this point so that I can get on the bus and go to school. So you're able to even see that kind of thinking, which like leads you to see that what you're providing them with is also giving them real world applicability, because they're able to apply themselves, thinking about solving solutions that relates to them. So yeah, vocational education, I feel, is as important, and I do think that they need to go hand in hand. And it's also important that we realize that a university degree isn't everything. There are ways that people can make a living for themselves that don't have to involve them going to university, because university is not for everyone. It really isn't for everyone, and there are ways that you can avoid that. There are so many things that you can do. Some people are not theoretical people, some people are more practical. Going to a vocational school allows for that. Being an apprentice allows for that. Some people are better with their hands than they are with their brains, and I don't feel like we should stomp on them just because it's not the traditional way of doing things. As long as it gets you to a particular end goal, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also like the fact that the children also created contextually relevant products, right?
Innovation.
So they're not producing jeans or sweater, right? Because it won't be relevant within their context, right? And so this all of this is really, really key, especially in how relevant the little materials that they are creating, is, and how well they're able to sell it. I'm sure that they've been able to scoop some
currencies.
Plenty times.
Yes, and because of their nature, they'll be able to easily appeal to you, and before you know it, you are jumping out.
Oh no, they're amazing salespeople. That one I'll give to them.
You see, so I really like the model that Neem Foundation has been able to create, and again, reaching out to potential partners, we've been able to crack the code, as you'd rightly say. So if you have legitimate dollars, please legitimate it.
Not the one that EFCC will be.
Legitimate dollars that you're not using. So partner with us and let's get education to the people who need it. This would come to our last aspect, which is education funding and civic support. What's the role of civic societies in education funding and support, Binga?
Okay, so like I said, education is total. And many times in Nigeria, I think in the African context, we're quick to draw the daggers against the government. Fundamentally, the government is the institution, the responsibility to sponsor education. But we must understand that Nigeria as a country is a very large country in terms of landmass and population, and our resources in terms of revenue may not be able, especially as it affects allocation to education, may not be able to cater for some of these challenges. And using the template of Neem Foundation's unique programs like the Lafia Sarari and the likes, you see that funding is not restricted to money. You see, you see interventions in terms of manpower, intervention in terms of equipment, interventions in terms of capacity building and all of that. So I think Nigeria, because we like money a lot, when we hear funding, we're quick to just think of it in dollars and naira. But then it's a lot more. And this is where civil society comes in. Whether foreign, whether local, I think we should begin to touchlight education. We should begin to look at ways we can plug the gaps, look at ways, whether we're adopting a school, we're adopting a community, we're adopting a state, there are people who can. There are institutions and organizations that can. But why are we more interested in, I mean, look at the political season. We had people picking forms for 100 million. You imagine how many children that will send to school, quality education. You imagine how many teachers that will train. You imagine how many computers that will get for schools to train their children in ICT. But like I said, it's not a one-man thing. So I feel civil society can do more. They're doing a lot currently, but more can be done. And it's not just in the aspect of monetary, interventions, but totalitarian interventions. And Neem Foundation has already set the pace.
Yes.
I think if other foundations are wondering or organizations are wondering how can we do it, there's no need to search for that. Just go to www.neemfoundation.org.
Shameless plug.
Miriam, in terms of our government, apart from obviously increasing funding for education in Nigeria, what are the other ways that government can look towards funding and supporting education in Nigeria?
I think there needs to be also a focus on teacher welfare and teacher capacity building as well. We need to start looking at how we can improve the capacity of our teachers and also how we recruit our teachers, because I feel like teaching has become something that people just wake up in the morning and like, well, I don't have a job to do, so guess what? I'm going to go to a school to teach. And I feel like the Nigerian government has also perpetrated that, because what you do is you send NYSC students NYSC coppers who have not, they don't have any type of teaching, they don't have any teaching experience. They don't have any. They didn't study anything related to teaching, and you just throw them in a school. Why? Because you have a dearth of teachers. But then you're not thinking about what you're doing to the students, because for all we know, this person is not a good teacher. For all we know, obviously, this person is not motivated to teach. So what are they going to do? They're going to show up when they want and how they want, if they even show up, and they do the work that they're supposed to do, and the basic things of just being a teacher structurally, developing lesson plans and all that. They don't know how to do these things, and then you just throw them into the classroom and they go and they teach ABC for a whole year. There's no plan. And there also a lot of teachers are also overworked and underpaid. You have a teacher to a classroom of 300. How is that supposed to work? So there obviously needs to be. But everything, again, goes back to funding, because if you don't have the money, how are you going to tackle these things? How are you going to build more schools to be able to reduce class sizes? Because one of the biggest issues is that within communities, there aren't a lot of schools. So you have maybe in one community, you have you have 3 communities sharing one school. So obviously all the attention is going to that one particular school. And then you have to accommodate. So you have a class, you have just one A to U. And in each class, there are 100, 200 students. How do you expect students to learn or even understand what the teacher is saying? How do you even expect the teacher to be able to captivate the attention of the students to even have them learn? So these are big issues that I think we need to look at. And it's not even just primary, secondary level. I even feel in university, we have that issue.
Yes.
And again, there also isn't checks and balances, especially in universities, we've given lecturers the ability to believe that they're God, because who comes into a class and says, I'm still baffled by that. A is for God, B is for me. You should be happy to teach, to give the knowledge that you have, share that. That's why you're a teacher in the first place, for the love of teaching, not for the love of being a tyrant.
Wow. Wow. I love where you stop. You know, when you said one teacher to 300 students, in my mind I was like, that's good though. In some places, I was class governor, and I remember one of our classes. It was one teacher, and we're 1,722.
God in heaven.
There's some people outside the building. Sometimes you don't hear anything
And this is
till
why
like 30, 45 minutes into the class, so you hear tear a sheet of paper. to do what?
And you know, that is why obviously there's no regulatory body. There's no body that comes in and inspects schools to make sure there's nothing keeping schools on their toes. There's no body that comes in to assess schools to say, okay, this is what you need to improve on. You know, like, so I don't even want to like link it, but like, you know how sometimes you have NAFDAC, if you have a restaurant, they'll just show up unannounced to evaluate your restaurant and tell you that we're closing you down because you're not doing what you're supposed to do, or we're giving you a rating of 2.5 out of 5 because this is this is wrong, this is that you're not clean enough. We don't have that for schools. That's why anybody can come and open a school. And, you know, collect money, because it's now become a lucrative business.
To university levels.
Even some.
I even think in university is a bit more regulated. But you see, primary, secondary schools, anybody just opens a school.
That's university. There are two ways. There are some people who even do their job, but they just go to the VC's office. And that is where they do all their... Of course, when brown paper exchange with brown skin.
Many private schools are,
you know, that is
glorified
one.
Secondary schools.
Yes.
Private universities.
Yeah,
are.
for sure.
You know,
I mean,
and it's just really problem not finished. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you've learned something, one thing or another. If you've not learned anything, is the fact just learn this one thing. Neem Foundation has an amazing plan. We've been able to crack this code, and if you're out there and you're looking to divert your legitimately gotten, again I say legitimately, and dollars, or you're looking at organizations that you can partner with in terms of education at any level, please reach out to us at neemfoundation.org.ng. Or you can go to our any of our social media handles, Neem_Foundation, and we'll definitely reach out to you. I want to thank my guests, Miriam Dambram and Binga of Life. The reason I put of life is I forgot your surname. You know, there's something you guys do. When a guy is greeting you, bros, my guy, I've forgotten your name.
And that is what you'll be referring
to. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We've been talking about education here on Neem Capsule podcast. My name remains Adedoyin Betiko, Senior Communications Officer here at Neem Foundation.
Doing of life.
Thank you so much. I think this of life is going to. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, and see you in the next episode of Neem Foundation podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you.